In the 1960s, Diana Baumrin published her groundbreaking work on parenting. In the brewing cultural scene of Berkeley, California, her team interviewed and observed over 100 parents of white middle-class preschoolers. They found that children whose parents were authoritative, supportive, yet firm, had better social and emotional outcomes. Later researchers studying adolescents found that the same parenting predicted less drug use and delinquency. But in the 50 years since this work appeared, both the world of adolescence and our understanding of that world have changed. Teens are digital natives, never having known a world without internet and cell phones. They are targeted consumers, having more disposable income and freedom to purchase than ever before. In the face of such change, do classic theories of parenting adolescents still apply? Or do they need to be modified, updated, or even replaced? In this video, you will hear from leading scholars who worked together for 2 years to address this question. Trainees at the Center for Developmental Science in North Carolina followed their work closely and asked each of them to talk about their own research, to talk about what are unique aspects of adolescence today, and to suggest future research that's needed to get us there. How does your research help promote healthy youth outcomes?
I think my goal of what I've been really trying to do is to just really try to understand the nuances of within group differences and what are sort of ways in which risk and resilience come together. I've been particularly as a clinical psychologist interested in understanding how these then play out in treatment or access to care.
In terms of class relations, in terms of race relations, and so hopefully this paper and this talk and my work more generally will help us to start to think about how parents talk to their kids about what it means to be of a certain social class and the implications of that for their health and well-being as well as other people's health and well-being.
I view my work as having given a voice to families that are often invisible in our literature on parenting. Much of the way that we're training our students and what they're reading is primarily based on urban African American families. But these are families that live their natural setting in their communities is where my work takes place. And we have the voices of positive strength-based patterns that are happening in these families, which I think is really important because it's that kind of information that allows us to develop preventive interventions, which is where my work has transformed into now.
What is new about adolescence today that may call for new or revised parenting theories?
Now there's more of a protracted period between childhood and adulthood, and so this is reflected in longer times that adolescents continue to be dependent on their parents financially and otherwise, with many adolescents still continuing to live at home with their parents, and even if they're not living at home, to be connected in ways technologically that were not as possible or common in the past.
As a parent, there's a new level of skills that I have to develop at this point, engaging more on a cognitive, emotional, social emotional way in which I didn't have to do when they were 5 or 6. So there are things that teenagers it's a different energy, whereas when they were younger, it was more physical energy. Now it's more mental energy. And thinking through how does that impact our engagement with a teenager in ways that it didn't when they were, 6 or 7 or 3.
In addition, adults are more likely to be having children with multiple other adults, so we call that multi-partnered fertility. And that means that there'll be ties outside of a given household. There'll be ties to other households and families. Families are spread across households. So it really changes the experience of adolescence.
What should developmental scientists do next to better understand how best to parent adolescents today?
I think actually one of the things that's interesting about thinking about parents is thinking about the developmental challenges that parents have as parents and adults, and I think bringing that together. So a little bit of work I've done on that has been on sandwich generation families, because one of the things that faces midlife parents is that their own parents are aging, and so trying to figure out how you're caretaking 2 generations. And I think that is something, just thinking broadly multi-generationally, developmentally about parenting.
So I think we know a lot about parenting adolescents and what types of parenting competencies are helpful during the adolescent period. However, what we know less about is maybe how the demands of parenting have changed today, where kids and parents can interact with more frequency through things like mobile phones and other digital technologies, and maybe in kind of different ways. So perhaps like more knowledge of your kids' behaviors through things like trackers or monitoring their online presence. And so we don't know that much about that. So I think that's definitely something we need to understand better, but I'm not convinced that it's necessarily distinct from what we already know. So I think something we need to research more and get a better handle on is whether or not, say, monitoring today, where there are new tools to do so, is really that different than monitoring even 20 years ago. Maybe it's just quantitatively different. You can do it more, but perhaps the same principles that have always guided monitoring, like respecting your child's autonomy and doing it in a developmentally appropriate level, are still important. So I think we need to figure that out.
The first, I think we need to think more about what is it that predicts parenting itself? What are the kinds of supports that parents might need? How do things like parents' cognitions and their context affect their ability to use effective parenting practices? I think that we understand somewhat about how parenting affects youth outcomes, but less about what actually helps parents or makes parents behave in a certain specific way. So I think to really improve some of our interventions, we need to understand more what is it that's happening in the parent themselves that helps predict these parenting behaviors.
We hope the work of our group challenges researchers and those who serve parents to think about new ways to help parents and youth navigate the world today. They deserve nothing but our best.